Shandon Baptist Church exists to make, mature, and multiply disciples of Jesus Christ one life at a time in the Midlands and beyond.
We are wrapping up 2025. Can you believe it?
Can't believe it.
I feel like we just got to 2025. And it is at the end of the year that so many of us set goals for the next year. Of course, setting goals is the easy part. Keeping them, that is the tough part. Hi, everyone. I'm Dondi Mercer-Plank. And in our last Shandon Plus podcast for 2025.
2025.
Not for forever, but just the last one for this year. Pastor Dr. Daniel Dickard is giving us a biblical approach to setting personal goals for the new year and actually keeping them. Now, Daniel, I know you set goals, and last time you and I talked about goal setting, I think you had a goal literally for every facet of your life. So I want you to share some of the goals that you have for this coming year with us and how you go through that process. I say that knowing that I want it to be that your sharing of your goals is going to inspire us, but it actually might really be discouraging because we're going to feel like such underachievers. So that said, tell us about your New Year's resolutions.
Well, I don't want to discourage everyone or anyone, but you said the goal is not just to have goals, but to keep them.
Exactly.
And I don't know that I keep all of mine, but I think it's good to have goals. I try to set my work goals or professional goals earlier in the year. So those were set earlier in 2025, getting ready for 2026. But as far as family and personal goals, my wife and I, we get together the last week every year of December. We've already done it for this year, and we set family goals. We'll go out to dinner together, have a nice dinner, but talk about what are our goals for our family, our kids, the things that we're going to be doing this year. And I also try to have personal goals such as reading goals and workout goals, fitness goals. And one of my reading goals for this year is I'm going to try to read a book every week. 52 books.
Because weren't you doing one like every month? I know, but every few weeks you have been doing?
At one point I was trying to do, listen, don't want to sound like an overachiever here, but I was trying to do 2 every week.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try to pull back. But I love reading. And so that's one of the goals that I try to set every year. And then some fitness goals. I just think it's good to have goals, something that you're pushing towards.
Yes.
You know, the old adage that if you'll aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And so, you know, let's try to get a goal out there, see if we can hit it. It's fitness goals, family goals, work goals. But ultimately, we give these to the Lord, and we'll see. Ask me midway through 2026 how it's going.
Yeah, we'll come back to this, right? So how does using the Bible to set our goals shift our focus from self-improvement? Because I think that's why a lot of people, how they base their goals, you know, on that concept of how can I improve myself? But how do we shift it from that to spiritual growth, which really, I mean, can mean self-improvement anyway?
Donna, you're right, because a lot of times when it comes to goals, if we're a type A personality, if we're an overachiever, that we try to do this in our own strength. And so we got to step back for just a moment when it comes to goals and make sure that they're the right goals out of the right motivation of the heart. Goals can be good if given from the right motivation. But as we have goals, you know, Christianity is not, I can do more, I can do better. A motto for Christianity is, I can't, but Jesus can, and he lives in me. If we'll live by those 10 words, I can't, but he can, and he lives in me, it'll change the way that we see our goals for this upcoming year. And one of the things that I try to think about, even in putting together goals are good, but goals cannot be our God. But even if goals are good, we've got to frame them with the right question. The right question is not, how can I achieve more this year? I think the right question is, how can I become a greater follower of Jesus this year? The question has to be a becoming question, not a doing question. As we've shared before, Christianity, it's not about being a human doing, it's a human being first. And so one of the verses that I think about is there in Romans chapter 8, where it says that those he predestined, that he called, and then it says that he called them to be conformed into the image of Christ. That's the ultimate goal, that we would be more like Jesus. When we get to the end of 2026, whether or not I hit some of these other goals that we've talked about, a fitness goal or perhaps a goal about reading or a professional goal, I think every Christian should have the goal, how have I become more like Jesus? So we've got to shift, even though goals can be good, goals are tools, they're not identities. And when goals become identities, they become a God. So goals are good, but goals are not a God.
A great perspective on keeping it in line with what it should be. But how do we do that? How do we align our New Year's resolutions to be Christ-centered so that God is the one doing the shaping of us into who he wants us to be?
Yeah, there's a passage in the Bible where it says, unless the Lord builds the house, those who labor do so in vain. There's a difference between having good goals and then living with anxiety and stress. And so how do we do this in a Christ-centered way? I think that we set goals, we have objectives in every facet of life. But at the end, we have to hand it over to the Lord. And unless the Lord does this, we really labor in vain. I think about the life of Jesus, and throughout Jesus' life, you can see that he is walking with a pattern. He's walking in a direction. Luke puts it this way, that the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which was lost. So I believe that from the time Jesus started his earthly ministry, even before that, but certainly as he started his earthly ministry, he knew there was one path, that was towards the cross. So he had some goals. Along the way, he's trying to shape his disciples because he knew that Christianity would move forward as these underwhelmed disciples would give everything to the cause. So he's trying to shape them along the way. But at the end of Jesus' earthly life, fully God, fully man, but Jesus also puts it this way, Father, remove this cup. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. So even Jesus, there was a relinquishing of control. And I think that we have to relinquish control to the Lord and say, God, these are your goals, but at the end of life, at the end of this year, ultimately it's what you do with them. So shoot for some big goals, but then hand it over to God.
And who are some people in the Bible whom we could emulate who set these goals and stayed on the right course to achieve them?
One of the first people that come to mind would be Nehemiah. So Nehemiah is an Old Testament character. He was a prophet of God, a godly man that God had put him within the court system. And under King Artaxerxes, that he sees that the walls of Jerusalem have been destroyed. And so he asked the king, he said, can I go back and rebuild these walls? As Nehemiah gets back to his homeland, for the first few days, he just walks and prays. And as he walks and prays, then he puts together a plan, and he has a plan. We're going to rebuild the walls for the Lord. And so I think one of the things that we can learn from Nehemiah is before he planned his strategy, he sought the Lord first in prayer. And I think even when it comes to goals, this may seem somewhat overly spiritual. I've said to our church before that we cannot manage the spiritual and we cannot spiritualize management. But when it comes to our goals, that I do think that we have to hand them over to the Lord and say, God, ultimately, give me the direction. What are the goals that you want me to set? And as we search through Scripture, allow those goals to be shaped and refined by Scripture. So Nehemiah is a good model. Another good model is the life of Daniel. Now, one of the things I love about the life of Daniel, many of us know the story of Daniel in the lion's den, or we know the story of Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But it says in the book of Daniel that he purposed in his heart before God. And I think that's really what a goal is. It's purposing in our heart before God the direction that we want to set for our life. And I think it was C.T. Studd who said, one life will soon be past. It's only what's done for Jesus that'll last. And so part of setting a goal is purposing in our heart that we're going to walk in a particular direction. If we're going to say yes to some things, we've got to say no to a lot of things. And that's something, Donnie, that just to be quite honest, I am not great at doing. I want to say yes to everything. And if the last 3 years of pastoring just this wonderful church with wonderful people, what I've learned is that sometimes my best yes is saying no. I can say no to some good things so that I can say yes to the things that I've purposed in my heart, that God has led me in this direction. I know that at the end of life, God's given me three things, and I don't think it's unique to me, it's to any Christian, that I'm to be a teacher of the Word, that I'm to be a disciple maker, and that I'm to be a man of prayer. And so I'm purposing in my heart, if there are things that I have to say no to in order to say yes to be a better teacher of the Word, to be a better disciple maker, to prioritize prayer more in my life as opposed to other good things, I think that we have to say no to some good things so that we can say yes to the best things. And another person, the last person that comes to mind is the life of Joseph. And, what Joseph tells me about goals is not to give up. Joseph had a lot of obstacles along the way. He was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. He's in prison for things that he had not done. He's left in prison and forgotten. And yet along the way, he remembered that God had a plan. And I love in the book of Genesis how it tells us about Joseph's life, and yet the Lord was with him. It's almost as if there's an ellipsis all throughout the book of Genesis, and then we just see the phrase, and the Lord was with him. And I don't think that Joseph always knew what God was doing in the moment. I think it's a false premise to say that we know in the moment what God is trying to do through our life. But Joseph could look at the end of his life after he's been able to restore his family and keep even the nation of Israel out of famine, that he could say, what the enemy meant for evil, God has turned to good. The Lord was with Joseph. So Joseph, I think, teaches us when it comes to goals, don't give up, even if you don't know in the moment exactly what God is doing. If you purpose in your heart in the right direction, you can look back and see what God was doing through faithful dependence in the right direction. As Eugene Peterson puts it this way, long obedience in the right direction.
That was so powerful. I feel like when I listen to this later, I know we're recording it now, but I always listen to them later, and I'm going to have to listen to that twice because there was a lot of good meat in there. But, as you were talking about Joseph, it made me think of like Moses. Here's a guy whose goal was to get his people to the promised land.
Yeah.
And all that came up against him for 40 years. And then knowing he's not going to enter it himself.
Yeah.
And yet he never gave up. And it would have been easy because sometimes we set these goals, but other people can get in the way. And it's easy to go, well, then I give up because I have all these obstacles being people.
Right.
He did not let that stop him.
And to be able to lead people that he realized it was going to be difficult, but he never gave up because, again, I think that in his heart he had one aim, one direction, but there was some fortitude, certainly in Moses' life, that he was not going to give up.
Right. What about people in the Bible who would be examples that we can learn from them still, who maybe set those goals but then caved?
The one that people would most likely recognize would be the life of David. And David, it says, was a man after God's own heart, and yet he fell into sin with Bathsheba, the adultery that takes place, then the great cover-up. And David did find restoration in life. I think of Psalm 51, where David says, "Restore unto me the joy of my salvation." David never lost his salvation, but there were certainly some consequences to David's life, that his family was in ruin as a result of some of the decisions that he made, and God certainly redeemed that, but he also had to live with the consequences. I think about Solomon. I don't know if anyone has started better in life and then flamed out like Solomon.
Right.
I mean, he was someone that prayed, God, give me wisdom above everything else. He had wealth, he had wisdom, he had leadership, and then he was distracted. But in the life of Solomon, one of my favorite books of the Bible is the book of Ecclesiastes. And at the end of Solomon's life, at this point, he's an old man, and he's looking back, and he says a famous line, Hevel Havalim. And what that means in English, that's a Hebrew translation, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And he could say there's nothing new under the sun. He talks about he thought that wealth and popularity and pleasure and all of these things would give him ultimate fulfillment. And at the end of life, he realized that there's a God-shaped vacuum in the whole of every individual, and only God can fulfill it. So I think Solomon teaches us it's not just the person who starts well, it's the one who ends well. And then, Paul says that Demas has deserted me for the love of the world. And that phrase is Paul, the great missionary, the one who has written more of the New Testament than any other individual. The fact that Paul would have someone that would go with him on missionary journeys, and yet there was something that pulled at Demas that caused him to turn his back on Paul and turn to the world. And as we've been studying 1 John this past year, 2025, now as we go into 2026, one of the things that we learned is do not love the world or the things of this world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. And the world pulls very hard. And Demas, on the one hand, he was the assistant to the greatest missionary at all time. And yet there was something in the world that pulled his heart away from the things of God. And so if it can happen to Demas, if it can happen to David, if it can happen to Solomon, it can happen to us. And I think that's why Scripture says that we have to constantly guard our heart, for it's a wellspring of life. Sin that is unaddressed will eventually come after us. And so we have to guard that heart, because if it happened to those individuals, it can certainly happen to us.
And we can learn from that example.
Yep.
So we know God is a God of details. And knowing that, how is being more specific in our goal setting helping us achieve success?
Well, specificity is important because God is the God of details. And so, we often say that he's not the God of chaos. He's the God of creation. Scripture says to do everything decently and in good order. So if a goal is worth setting, it's worth thinking through. And not that everyone will hit every goal, but the goals that matter in life, I think when it comes to your family, or when it comes to your faith, when it comes to your finances, I try to think about it like this ongoing wheel. And so as my faith grows, then it's going to challenge me in areas of perhaps my family. And as my family grows, it perhaps is going to help me in areas of finance, and finance is going to help me to resource those other things. So I think if we think of a goal in a flywheel, and it always has to start with your faith. If it starts anywhere else, I think that ultimately your goals will be more humanistic than they will be theistic. But if we start with our faith, and then it's family. So God first, and then our family. And then, from our family, that we have to start thinking about the resources and our finances. And I think everybody should have financial goals. As you go into next year, think, how much are you going to try to save? Where are you going to try to spend? Our wallets, our pocketbooks are ultimately a reflection of our priorities. And I think that God gives us those things. Money is not evil. Some people think that when Christians talk about money that, it's in a negative way. Money is a good resource. It's the love of money. But if we purpose our money in the right direction, our finances in the right direction, that it can then fuel, think of a flywheel, that it goes back into our faith and how we can advance the kingdom of God and how we can support our family. And then from our family, this one big flywheel. I would encourage those who are listening today, if you're thinking about goals, set goals for your faith, set goals for your family, set goals for your finances, and let the flywheel effect take place.
But when using that specificity, or being specific, because specificity is too hard to say, so I'll just say being specific. I still can't get it out. But I think of you can't just say, I'm going to save money this year, or I'm not going to spend as much money this year. It's got to be so specific with, I'm going to save $10 today.
That's right.
Not getting that extra little knick-knack that, eventually goes in the giveaway box, that sort of thing. Let's talk about Proverbs 27:17. It says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. How can accountability with fellow Christians help you in keeping goals?
Goals are important, but also having those who will hold you accountable is important. And that's why I encourage everyone, be a part of a group. If you're listening today and you're not part of Shandon, I know a lot of the Shandon viewership listens and watches what we do here on the podcast. But if you're a part of another church, be involved in a small group. Now, one of the most life-giving and rewarding disciplines in my life, Dondi, is that every year I start a new grow group. And regardless if I were pastor of Shandon or not, I would have this in my life. Now, this year, I will meet with 6 other individuals every Monday. We start the week off strong. We've already got our Bible reading plan, our memory verses, and we will meet together. But I told the guys in our week 0 meeting, we meet in December, get to know one another, and then we start strong in January. I tell them, I'm not pastor in this setting. I'm Daniel. I need this more than you guys.
Sure.
And each week, I'll ask them, is there anything that you've looked at that would be displeasing to the Lord? Have you honored your wife this week? Have you honored your kids this week? How have you led well as a dad, as a husband? And then I'll always ask the question at the very end, was there anything that you were dishonest about? All right. So, and I've found that in those settings, again, it takes time for trust to be built up. But having that accountability, iron sharpening iron, it goes a long way. And when I'm in a rut, when someone can see, a lot of times someone else can see when we're in a spiritual rut long before we can. And so to have someone that we know that we trust, that loves us, that has our best goals in mind, I think it just helps when it comes to goal setting. So set goals, let other people around you know what those goals are, and then lovingly hold others accountable. And not in a legalistic sense, but in an encouraging sense. Whenever it comes to running, so I've recently, over the last several years, got into running, but the first half marathon that I ran, it was amazing. When I was running by myself, I was a lot slower in pace. But I had some friends who were pace setters in this particular marathon or half marathon that I ran. And as I ran beside them, I ran faster. I was stronger. I was better. And in the same way, when you hold someone else accountable, you can be a spiritual pace setter for them. So it's good to have goals, but also have those who will hold you accountable. You will run faster spiritually in that scenario.
Go the distance. I know my goal is to keep this podcast to 20 minutes, and I know Jonathan's given me the 20-minute mark. I was kind of winking like, I know, but I'm just going to take a couple more minutes here if I can. We know the Lord is interested in who we're becoming, and He wants us to be able to accomplish that. But is it okay to not set goals?
I think it's okay to not set goals for every area of life. But I think every person has to know the direction in which they're running. And so in a sense to say, I'm going to set no goals in life, well, you may not have those written down, but you've got some goals in life. Goals are a reflection of a priority, and everyone has priorities. That priority may not be God. It could be something else, but everyone has priorities. And part of having the right goals is taking our priorities with our resources and our time. Our greatest resource is time, and trying to align those together. And I was recently convicted of this. I saw a meme online where it showed how we can waste time through social media and we miss out on the goals. So you may not have goals written down. I would encourage folks to do that. But even if you don't have goals written down, everybody has a goal. It's just a matter of making sure that your life is going in the same direction with values. When your values and your goals are not going in the same direction, ultimately those values will show up. They just go in the wrong direction.
And as we wrap up here, Daniel, one goal could be for people the Bible reading through in a year.
Yeah.
And we offer several Bible reading plans here.
Yeah, that's right. So we are starting a new plan this year, church-wide. You can find it on our church's website, shandon.org. It is the New Testament 260 plan. So if you read 5 days a week, you get off for the weekends, and you do this for 52 weeks, you'll read through the entire New Testament. So
Nice. Yeah.
I found that in my own life, the snowball effect, I've said before, Leviticus has killed more Bible reading plans than any other book of the Bible. So find a plan that is manageable. If you haven't read through the Bible in a year before, don't try a plan that's going to try to read the Bible through 3 times in a year. It's not, start small, but have a plan. There was a study that was done years ago that said this: the greatest way that you will grow spiritually, spiritual discipline, is to read the Bible every day. So let's get into the Bible. Again, we said faith, family, finances, this flywheel effect. It starts with being in the Word. Find a Bible reading plan, get into it. It'll bless you this year.
And as we want everybody to make it a goal to be with us next week as we begin a new series called Jesus On. Give us a quick preview of that.
Yeah, so the life of Jesus, we know that all the Bible is inspired by God. It's not that the red letters are more inspired than the other parts, but when Jesus speaks, it should matter. It says all authority is given to him. So in this new series, we are going to take the various subjects that Jesus addressed, such as marriage or temptation, baptism. The list is long. And for the next 6 months here at Shandon, we're going to see what Jesus says about some of the most important topics of life. So it'll be a fun series. It'll be relevant, but we're going to take the words of Jesus and we're going to see what he says about the important issues of life.
And that will go along with the sermons as well. And with the first one being Jesus on a New Start, which is perfect for the start of 2026, which is coming up around the corner. For Shandon Plus Podcast, I'm Dondi Mercer-Plank.
And I'm Daniel Dickard, Senior Pastor of Shandon Baptist Church, signing off. We'll see you next year.